I'm Lee C. Camp, and this is No Small Endeavor, exploring what it means to live a good life. Today I'm joined by our executive producer, Jakob Lewis, to discuss the moments from conversations that have stayed with us from 2025.
We'll talk about clips like this one from America's government teacher, Sharon McMahon.
Nobody can do everything, but everyone can do something. And we cannot allow our inability to solve all of the world's problems paralyze us into doing nothing.
And we'll talk through moments from my conversations with Jen Hatmaker, Terrence Lester, Baratunde Thurston, and Sheryl Crow.
Plus, at the end, we'll share a clip from our new show that we launched this year called The Subtext.
So stay tuned. The clips that stayed with us from 2025 coming right up here on No Small Endeavor. Hey friend, if you didn't know, I started a newsletter a while back that comes out every 2 weeks. I've been delighted to hear from so many of you about positive response to the newsletter. We call it the No Small Endeavor Notebook, where I riff on themes and topics related to our podcast, giving you additional material for thinking and doing in your own quest to make sense of what it might mean to live a good life. Join us by going now to nosmallendeavor.com and sign up there. Again, go to nosmallendeavor.com to sign up now for our free No Small Endeavor Notebook newsletter. Hey, my friends, have you ever wondered what's actually in your tap water? The truth is, contaminated water can look totally clear while still carrying pollutants that pose real health risks. And here's another surprise. Many common fridge and pitcher filters barely touch the most harmful contaminants. Some bottled water even contains microplastics. So, what can you do? Consider AquaTrue, the countertop water purifier trusted by thousands. It's been independently tested and certified to remove 84 different contaminants, including chlorine, lead, PFAS forever chemicals, and microplastics. Its patented 4-stage reverse osmosis system delivers exceptionally pure, healthy water without any plumbing or installation. AquaTrue has been featured in Business Insider and Popular Science, and Good Housekeeping named it the best countertop water filter. And customers agree. 98% say that their water is cleaner, safer, and healthier. Plus, it comes with a 30-day best-tasting water guarantee. Head to aquatrue.com now to get 20% off your purifier with promo code NSE. That's aquatrue.com. AQUATRU.com. Promo code NSE.
Every Christmas, I think about the gifts that really matter. Not the wrapped ones under the tree, but the ones that change someone's life forever. And recently, I heard a story from Mercy Ships that I just can't shake. A mom brought her little boy on board. He'd been living with a condition that could be fixed with a simple surgery, but there was no surgeon anywhere near his village. After his free operation, she said, "You've given my son his future back." Y'all, that is a Christmas gift. Globally, 5 billion people lack access to surgical care. In sub-Saharan Africa, there's only one surgeon for every 200,000 people. But Mercy Ships is stepping into that gap in the most beautiful way, bringing free, life-transforming surgeries to people who would otherwise have no access to care. They help the blind see. They straighten twisted limbs. They remove deadly tumors. They treat cleft conditions and so much more. With state-of-the-art hospital ships, they provide safe surgery for children and adults completely free of charge. And it's all powered by an all-volunteer crew of surgeons, nurses, engineers, cooks, people who give their time and talents to make the world better. And here's where we get to help. Your donation provides free, safe surgeries to people in desperate need of hope. This Christmas, you can make your impact felt, and every gift is matched. Please donate today at mercyships.org/podcast. That's mercyships.org/podcast.
I'm Lee C. Camp, and this is No Small Endeavor, exploring what it means to live a good life. I'm joined in the studio today by our executive producer, Jakob Lewis. Hey, Jacob.
Hey, Lee. I am so glad to be here.
And I am glad that you are here. So look, I understand that you have gone through our episodes from this year and selected some of our most talked about moments from interviews.
Yeah, I've talked to you. I've talked to people on our team. I've talked to some of our listeners. And it has been a great year for conversations on No Small Endeavor. And so we wanted to share all of those things that stayed with us, whether it was helpful, hopeful, thought-provoking. So we're going to revisit your conversation with Baratunde Thurston about being human in our technological age. We're going to talk about deconstructing and reconstructing faith with Jen Hatmaker. We'll hear a hopeful story from your conversation with Terrence Lester. And we'll talk about the stories we tell ourselves from your interview with Sheryl Crow. And at the end of the episode, we'll share a bit from a new show that we launched this year, right from inside the No Small Endeavor family, called The Subtext, Beneath the Headlines, Beyond the Obvious. But we're going to start first with your conversation with Sharon McMahon.
Sharon McMahon is referred to as America's government teacher. She's an author and influencer. And this one stuck with our audience, I think, for a lot of reasons. People just love Sharon. She's got 1.3 million followers on Instagram. But we'll play this short clip, and then we'll discuss why we think this stayed with so many of our listeners.
As a big recurring theme of my work is nobody can do everything, but everyone can do something. And we cannot allow our inability to solve all of the world's problems paralyze us into doing nothing.
Now, Lee, why do you think that struck such a chord?
Well, I think so often we have this felt need for control, and that can naturally lead to paralysis because life teaches us that we are in control of almost nothing. As well, the overwhelming nature of the world's need can lead us to despair. And I've been fascinated for a long while with this idea in the Christian tradition that despair is often seen as a grave sin, a grave failing, and despair leading us to no longer trust that it is possible that mercy or grace can manifest any constructive change, whether that be in ourselves or in our communities or in the world or human history at large. And so the antidote to that seems to be at least twofold. First, holding on to some sort of hope, some expectation of the possibility of change. And second, a humility about our own place in such redemptive moves in the world. So in Sharon's quote there, it's, you can't do everything, but you can do something. So hold on to hope and then do what you can do.
All right, I want to play a longer section of your conversation with Sharon about how a seemingly isolated act of kindness tremendously contributed to Sharon's own life and informed her in ways that remind us all that we can't do everything, but we can do something.
In thinking about people who have been proactive in that way and made a contribution to the world, where do you remember in your own kind of autobiographical narrative first being moved by someone who took what they had and exercised it for the common good?
Well, I think most of us can think about stories in our own personal lives where we have encountered a situation where we're like, I don't know why that person helped me, but they did. There was a time when I was a super poor college student and I was working 2 jobs. And, I grew up in a really cold northern climate where you have to salt the roads really aggressively to make them passable. And my car had so much rust that it had literally eaten holes in the floor of the car. And that's not an exaggeration. I had pieces of cardboard on the floor of my car. I worked hard to save up my money and I paid $500 for that car. Okay. So that's what we're talking about here. So I'm trying to go to college and I'm trying to work multiple jobs. And it was like impossible to try to keep a roof over my head and keep up with my very demanding schoolwork. I definitely remember this moment where I was getting off of my job and I was just feeling very dejected and overwhelmed. And I got out to my car. And when I opened the door, what fluttered down onto the seat of my car was a $100 bill. I still to this day don't know where that came from. Obviously, somebody put it there and they got into my car somehow, which, by the way, the doors didn't lock and it had no radio, Lee. It had no radio and the doors didn't lock. I wasn't homeless. I wasn't destitute, but they obviously knew that I needed it. And I can think of a lot of examples of times in my own life and times in the lives of others where someone has just done for one person what they wish they could do for everybody. That feeling has stuck with me over the years. Somebody helped me just because they could. I'm still carrying that forward.
Yeah, that's a beautiful line. Someone did for one person what they wish they could do for everybody. That's beautiful. I do think that's beautiful, and it reflects the humility that I spoke of a moment ago. You, I, we can't fix the world, but we can make manifest in some small way, or sometimes larger ways, the kind of changes we hope to see in the world.
Yeah. So another thing that stayed with us on the team this year was your conversation with Jen Hatmaker. It seems this year we've had a lot of talk about deconstructing one's own faith or religion, specifically American evangelicalism.
Yeah, I mean, conversations with Mike Cosper, Cheryl Crow, Charles Marsh, Phil Vischer, Sky Jethani, Nadia Boltz-Weber, all of those conversations touched upon that in some way.
And in particular, there was a theme that stayed with me from our episode with Jen, and that theme was about trusting one's own body. So we talked to her about her memoir, Awake, and it starts with the way she discovered her husband was having an affair. She woke up in the middle of the night to him voice texting his girlfriend in bed next to her, which was the beginning of the end for their over 2-decade marriage. She said her life fell apart, but it began a process of rethinking everything: her faith, who she is, and one thing that became illuminated is that she had inherited a belief that she shouldn't or couldn't trust herself, her own intuition, or the messages her own body was giving her.
I was raised in a really traditional, conservative, religious space. I was taught that my body, my feelings, my perception, my desires were fully untrustworthy, that I was absolutely not a reliable source of authority in my own life. In fact, we were taught overtly to outsource all of our authority. In fact, we were taught to actively distrust our instincts. If we really wanted something, that should raise a red flag. And so I had a very tumultuous relationship with my own body, including my own instincts. When you are told from the time you are in second grade that you are inherently bad and that you are just desperately in need of someone to save you from your own wickedness, that is a worldview that is very hard to reverse. When I lost my marriage, my brain was a poisonous loop of shock and grief and trauma, and I'd seen things I couldn't unsee, and I just could not escape it. And so for maybe the first time in my life, I went to my body and went, I wonder if my body might be a more gentle guide through this season of life. And so I had new practices that I put into place. I worked with meditation. Guided meditation became my number one tool to talk me out of being in my head and get me back into my body. And it was a transformative experience. I'm still learning to experience the world through the trustworthiness of my own body, which is like a whole new day for me.
So a lot there, Lee. What comes up for you from this section of your conversation with Jen Hatmaker?
Yeah, there's so much helpful there that is worth a lot of consideration and conversation. But kind of two things here that I would mention. One is that I relate in my own childhood experience with the I was raised in a similar context, Southern Bible Belt culture, loads of shame and purity culture. And I relate to that also as a male. I mean, that often fell very hard also on boys in obviously different ways, but it also could be very destructive. And I subsequently would spend a lot of time working through a lot of that kind of stuff. And so learning the ways in which my body, my intuitions, my gut feelings often are very trustworthy and are very important forms of communication, of information that I should pay attention to. I find all that very, very helpful. At the same time, there still is this question of, what does it mean to listen to the body? Or maybe a better way to put it is, what does it mean to listen to the body well? That is, there's a question of moral and character formation here that at some point has to be raised. So in other words, speaking for myself at least, there are probably a lot of things I don't want, in fact, to do in obedience merely to my body. That is, I want to start from a posture that is non-shaming, that acknowledges that my body can be a very trustworthy form of communication to me, of teaching me things, but then also allow questions about what it means to be a human being, that through my body or through my intellect or through whatever form of communication to me, how does that get informed by what I believe to be beautiful and true and good? And obviously those are very long, complicated conversations, but are important ones.
Another very popular episode this year was your conversation with Terrence Lester. Now, Terrence is a scholar, an activist, and he told a beautiful story from his book, From Dropout to Doctorate, Breaking the Chains of Educational Injustice.
As you share in your book, you drop out of school, and then this begins yet another kind of series of challenges and ways in which you decide to try to re-engage. You share at one point about an unhoused friend that had a profound impact upon you, which I thought was a beautiful story.
I was in high school at this point, and by this time I had fallen behind. I was transferred to an alternative school, and this alternative school was called Open Campus, which means you go to school, you work at your own pace. There's an educator present in the classroom, but it's an open campus. You can come and go as you please. Some teenagers there were working jobs. Some were living out of their cars. Some were staying in shelters. Some were so impoverished they were dealing with their own circumstances. I would describe it as a school with students who were all journeying through something very hard. But that hardness for me was almost like a breaking point. And I remember being in class and just feeling so disconnected from school. And I pushed myself away from the desk in front of the teacher. I get up, I walk out the classroom. A few of my friends followed. I walked straight out of the school building. And I'm walking away, and there was this guy experiencing homelessness. He calls over to our group. We had to be less than 100 yards away from the school. And he's stumbling around, trash hanging from his beard. Clothes looked like they hadn't been changed in probably a month. And I was the only person to respond. My friends kept talking. It was almost like an aside in the stage play, right? I walk over to him and he says, "I don't want any money." And I said, "Yes, sir." And he points back at my school and he says, "Is that your school back there?" And I said, "Yes." He says, "Whatever you do, you don't want to end up like me." And he looks himself up and down. He says, "Whatever you do, you're going to have to keep fighting to get your education, because one day you'll be a leader." Just like out of the blue, this total stranger. And he had no idea that, I had run away from home, experienced a brief moment of homelessness, lived from friend's house to family member's house. He had no idea that I struggled early on with my relationship with my father that later was repaired. I talk about it in the book. He had no idea how I felt out of touch with education. But that moment, that brief moment, became the catalyst of God doing something amazing in my life. I heard him, right? This total stranger who saw something in me and was calling me a leader, even in the midst of my grief and my context. And that became the stepping stone for me to say, there is more to this life.
Now, that's the second story in this episode from this year about a serendipitous, tiny encounter that had huge consequences, like we heard from Sharon McMahon earlier. What was it about this one that stayed with you?
I think maybe because, as a teacher, academic, writer, all of the people in those kind of fields care a lot about the power of words and know the profound impact of words, and are also aware of the potentially disproportionately large impact that carefully chosen words at just the right time can have upon the whole trajectory of another person's life. And we should also note that the impact that our words can have upon the trajectory of another person's life can be for good or for ill. And we should never take that power for granted, and always be attentive, I think, to the ways that we might be kind to another human being by well-timed, gracious words.
Well said. All right. Well, Lee, with that, will you take us into a break?
Jacob, I would love for you to do it instead.
Oh, well, you're listening to No Small Endeavor and our episode on what stayed with us in 2025. We love hearing from you, so tell us about what you're reading, who you're paying attention to, or send us feedback about today's episode. You can reach Lee at lee@nosmallendeavor.com.
Hello, friends. Lee Seacamp here. Do you ever wish you had more folks to discuss the conversations we offer on No Small Endeavor? Something like a podcast listening club where you could engage big ideas about what it means to live life well and then discuss it with friends and companions? If so, you have stumbled upon the announcement you have been waiting for. We're pleased to announce the start of Endeavor Together, our new initiative that equips and nurtures close-knit communities to talk about the things you actually want to talk about. Each small group conversation series is built upon our podcast content and provides you with super easy to use content with questions, videos, links, and guidance so that you or any good and willing soul can host small group conversations exploring what it means to live a good life. Maybe you'll meet in homes around a table, maybe in a coffee shop or local park, maybe at work during lunch hour, maybe in a church Sunday school class. What we are providing is the scaffolding for good conversation. The rest is up to you. And here's the best part. Thanks to generous support from the Lilly Endowment, it's free. The first 2 series have been released. The first, Let's Disagree Better, and the second, Vulnerability. Get started today. Visit nosmallendeavor.com and click on Endeavor Together. Again, go to nosmallendeavor.com and click on Endeavor Together. Enjoy. Welcome back to No Small Endeavor, exploring what it means to live a good life. I'm Lee Seacamp. I'm joined today by our executive producer, Jakob Lewis, discussing the conversations that stayed with us this year.
One thing, Lee, we've learned this year is that conversations about AI do about as well as conversations about climate change on the show. That is, people deeply care, but they are exhausted and overwhelmed by the enormity of the issue, so they don't really want to listen. And that's why I so appreciated Baratunde Thurston. Because while the topic was AI, the framing of his work is really about interdependence and the web of relationships in the universe. So Baratunde is a polymath of sorts, a satirist, technologist, storyteller, TV presenter, and host of the podcast Life with Machines, all about AI. I'm going to play a rather long section of this interview. It's about 9 minutes. It covers our coexistence with AI, what makes us human, and the intelligence of nature. And then I really want to hear your thoughts on this one.
All right, sounds good. Let's listen. I think it's your show trailer. You asked the question, will we be AI's parents or its pets? But if we turn that around and ask, what do you think AI teaches us about ourselves? What are you seeing or speculating that AI teaches us about what it means to be human?
We are less and more than we think. We are less special than we think, in that AI is able to produce things. People using AI are able to produce things that previously only people in collaboration actively with other people consciously could produce. And I think AI reveals that we're more special. Our embodied existence for now is still unique. Our collective sensing and knowing that, this indiscernible nature of who we are, that je ne sais quoi, as the French might put it, there is something human, something about being of our type of life is special. And we will most likely value that uniquely in a future where our outputs and our economic productivity is not the special thing at all.
Fascinating. One of the things that you're pointing to that I myself very much appreciate is that you're kind of refusing to give us any sort of reductionistic account of what it means to be human. It's a very complex reality of what it means to be a human, right? It seems to me that we learn a lot of things by being embodied that an AI can't learn yet, right? Because I think we learn a great deal through pain, and we learn a great deal through pleasure, and various sensate experiences teach us a great deal. that I don't know yet. Maybe someday, I don't know. But at the moment, at least, that's something very moving about what it means to be human. Another thing that you pointed to is that we tell stories to one another, and that there's something about telling of stories that also makes us human. And it's a primary way in which we're formed. Our character is formed, our sense of what we value is formed, sense of community is formed, and so forth and so on. So I don't know, what are you seeing in terms of reductionistic ways of thinking about what it means to be human?
I guess I'm an expansionist in contradiction to being a reductionist. I do think embodiment is a big part of it. The lack of a body is not going to protect us. They will have bodies. They already do. Some of them look like cars. Some of them look like vacuums. But I don't think that's going to be enough to say oh, this is what it means to be human. I think what it means to be human is always shifting. Is it to be a child of God? Is it to be a member of a lineage? Is it to be in community of others? Is it to speak this particular language in this way? Is it to know these songs? Is it to live and then to die? Humans are a story. We have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Does a large language model have that kind of story? Is our finiteness and our imperfection a part of what we embrace? I think we're not building tools. We're creating a new population that we will live with, we will work with, we will play with. They'll be in our org charts. They'll be in our friend networks. They'll be in our family trees. Children will grow up and date them, and we'll have changed laws, as we've done before, to allow for deep partnership, what we call marriage today, or adoption, of some kind. And all of that is going to create, for lack of a better word, a real funky future. And in the greater context, Lee, I'm also I'm in an expansive quest about our relations. And as much as I stretch into this machine and AI conversation, I'm also humbly stretching into this more than human life, this rights of nature, this indigenous worldview conversation, this what is the intelligence of nature, and the network of trees and mycorrhizal fungi and the animal kinship that many people across time have experienced before we were severed from earth and land. And I think our human future will likely lay in a recognition, a humble recognition, of our position on a spectrum of broadly defined life and a spectrum of literal light. That at the very end of the longest day, we're just light. We are vibrating at a frequency. We are explosion, Big Bang energy. And whether it is this remote control that I hold up in my hand right now, or the plants I see out my window, or the audio transcription service that you're likely going to use to help create the transcript of this based on AI, they're all energy, and we are definitely that. And we have temporary form and awareness of that form in these bodies, and we create the meaning of that for ourselves. So what meaning do we want to create? What's going to make it worthwhile? And not a nihilistic, meaningless, everything is everything and nothing is nothing, land of blah. I don't want that. I want meaning.
A lot there from Baratunde, so let's take this point by point. First, what does it mean to be human? Baratunde mentions that it's not one thing, that it's tradition, community, language, finitude. What stays with you from all of that?
Well, first, yes, I think that's right. It's not one thing. I think at this point, all I would want to say or have time to say is that Baratunde makes it clear that we have not yet begun to consider all of the questions we are increasingly going to have to address that we wouldn't even have imagined that we will have to grapple with 10 years ago. And it's a fascinating, scary, somewhat intimidating, but also exciting time to have to ask really important questions. And I'm grateful for people that help us do that.
Yeah. One thing that really stood out to me was Baratunde's unflinching assertion that we will literally change our laws to allow for AI human partnerships like marriage. I think what stays with me is, regardless of the ultimate expansiveness of that kind of thing, it's kind of already true and it will happen 100% because of our human nature?
I don't know. I have to say I'm holding out hope that we will not change our laws to imagine a covenant relationship with technology. And, that's fundamentally distressing to me. And it certainly will prompt, as we've already indicated here, lots of conversations about what relationships with technology does mean and entail. But I don't know. I still have a fairly hopeful, high view of being human. And I'm not so ready to concede that we should allow the intrusion of technology into such relationships.
We also had Astro Teller from Google's X Development LLC, aka the Moonshot Factory, which they develop radical technologies designed to address major global challenges. Now, Astro also pointed out that AI kind of brings out this question about human specialness, but in a different way, saying that AI has really shown humanity that we're not that special, and he kind of stayed in that lane. Or perhaps not special maybe in the ways that we thought. But hands down, the clip that stayed with us on the team this year has been this exchange about large-scale technological solutions versus small and local solutions.
As I've been getting ready to have this conversation, I found myself kind of a number of times thinking about Wendell Berry. Are you familiar with Wendell Berry?
I'm not.
Wendell Berry's a Kentucky farmer. He's also a poet and a novelist and an essay writer. And he's been quite influential in both the literary world and also in critiques of technology. One of the things that he has said is that in the Western world, we have this obsession with scale and speed. And that kind of obsession with global, big, gigantic solutions with scale and speed might do more harm than good, or creates more harm than good. And that he would then say the real work that we have to do as human beings is slow, local, relational, rooted in attention rather than technical ambition. And so I'm just wondering if Wendell Berry were to say something like that to you, what immediately strikes you? How would you say you might agree with that? And how would you say you might disagree with that?
I would say this is an opportunity for an and, not an or. Come on, Wendell, you're right, and the things that we're doing are helping. Do I agree that there's a lot about the world that is slow, that is personal, that is local, that is deeply human? Of course I do. Is that a rejection of toothpaste, vaccines, the wheel, the lever, the printing press, computers? Like, come on. Like, humanity's longest lever for improvement in solving its problems is technology. I don't think it's seriously credible to argue that technology doesn't have an important place in helping humanity continue to sort of up level and be a better version of itself, to have more goodness for everybody on the planet than we currently do. That's not a rejection of Wendell's perspective. I just think there's room for both.
So what from this clip stayed with you?
Well, I'm torn here about what Astro Teller had to say. On the one hand, I want to believe what he says there, but I hear Wendell Berry saying that we have this sort of idealistic vision that we can fix our problems with X by doing more X. And I don't know. I don't have too many messianic hopes for technology to fix the fundamental problems that face us. Clearly, technology can do a lot, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And one of the subtle things about technology is that it always seems like the next development is obvious that you would want to take up what technology offers us. But what Wendell Berry and people like Jacques Ellul are always pushing us to ask is, are we considering what that presumption about technology is doing to us as a whole? And in what way must we step away from those presumptions about technology and find a different way forward? Garrett Graff, who we also interviewed this year on his recent work on the internet, he and I had a different sort of discussion of technology. And he wondered whether all the horrors that have come in the wake of, say, social media, the way he put it, he says he's asking, does this technology really just show us who we really are, which I think is a rather pessimistic interpretation, perhaps, of humanity and human culture. And I actually think I'm a bit more optimistic, if that's the right word. I don't know. But I think I'm a bit more optimistic. And so I instead asked whether technology instead facilitates the worst possible version of ourselves. And so implicitly what I'm asking there is, can we still opt for better versions of ourselves? And what then must we look for to facilitate that better version of ourselves?
I think you and I and Astro are in agreement that we can opt for better versions of ourselves.
Yeah, I certainly hope that we all want to long for that and reach for that.
Well, I think it's time for a break.
All right. Well, you're listening to No Small Endeavor. I'm joined in the studio today by our executive producer, Jakob Lewis, discussing what stayed with us from all of our marvelous guests on No Small Endeavor in 2025. Coming up is a short break, followed by talking about sensitivity with Sheryl Crow and a clip from our new show from the NSC family called The Subtext.
When the holidays start to feel a bit repetitive, reach for a Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry and put your twist on tradition. A bold cranberry and winter spice flavor fusion, Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry is a refreshing way to shake things up this sipping season. And only for a limited time. Sprite. Obey your thirst.
In Walmart's Newville, time was ticking away. Only a few nights left till the big holiday. But last-minute gifters had no need to worry. Walmart Express Delivery got their gifts in a hurry. From Nintendo to Nespresso and Lego flowers, they could check off their lists in as fast as an hour. All of Newville, East, West, South, and North, could order gifts up until 5 p.m. on December 24th. So this holiday, just do as the Who's do. With gift delivery this fast, they all gasped. From Walmart, who knew? Subject to availability, terms and fees apply.
Welcome back to No Small Endeavor, exploring what it means to live a good life. I'm Lee C. Camp, and I'm joined today by our executive producer, Jakob Lewis.
Hey, hey.
Hey, Jakob, discussing the conversations that stayed with us this year.
So, Lee, now we're going to revisit your conversation with Sheryl Crow. And before we hear a bit of that, many listeners would be interested to know that, often these interviews we do by necessity are remotely recorded. The guest is in another city, and you're here in Nashville. And occasionally we have the good fortune to have some folks in person, whether at an event or you travel to them. Like you got to be with Parker Palmer, Martin Sheen, Rainn Wilson, like in their houses. Pretty cool. What a fun perk. But for Sheryl Crow, she came over and you just interviewed her on your living room couch. What was that like for you?
Oh, I didn't like it at all.
What?
I loved it.
Is that one of those like Southern jokes? Okay.
Yes, I loved it. What's not to love about Sheryl Crow coming over to your house and sitting on your couch and talking to you for an hour and a half? No, it was great. I mean, originally her management had wanted us to tape it remotely, even though we're both here in Nashville. And so I just thought, well, I'm not playing that game. So I just texted her, or I think I texted Sheryl, and I said, hey, we're scheduled for this interview. The psychological game I was playing was I was thinking, we'll come to your house or you could come to our house. And I'm thinking, of course she's going to, if she chooses to do it in person, of course she's going to say, well, yeah, come to my house and we can do it in my studio. Yeah. But she replied and she said, yeah, that sounds great. I'll come to your house.
Gulp.
Yes. So it was lovely. It was wonderful.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What a delicious backstory.
Yeah.
Well, it was a lovely conversation with you and Sheryl. So I'm going to play a bit of that now.
One thing that I am reminded of every single day is that you start off who you uniquely are, and your whole life you're handed a whole ton of lessons to remind you of who you are. And now that I'm older, or shall I say wiser, as a 63-year-old, I feel more authentically myself as who I was when I was young than I ever have. More attached to my upbringing, more reminded of where I'm from. And I think it takes a lot of living to get to that point. I think one of the other things that surprises me is that no matter what the story you tell yourself about what your life is supposed to look like, you limit it. And that was something that I did not learn until I got diagnosed with breast cancer. That you can carry this picture of what life is supposed to look like based on how you were brought up or whatever. But that can be so limiting. And, by the time my kids came along, I had been to almost every country I could think of. And that's the kind of thing that you could not imagine. I do, in my woo-woo way, I have to give it up to God for a lot of the lessons that I've learned, that you don't get the lessons until the second you get them. And he must have a great sense of humor, or she must have a great sense of humor.
Say more about working out of, releasing, letting go of certain interpretations of our own memories, interpretations of our own stories. What's that look like for you?
I've been very open with my struggles with mental challenges, largely genetic, and have had the good fortune of being able to get therapy through the years. And a lot of what we tell ourselves is not based in an actual experience. It's based on sort of mythology. I can look at my mom when I was 8 years old and feel like she was really sad. And so I would assign myself the role of being the entertainer. I was funny, I was cute, I was smart, I could play the piano by ear, I could do all these things, shucking and jiving. And when she would smile, that was love, And you assign yourself these roles at a young age based on a mythology that you tell yourself that isn't real. You're talking about a 30-year-old woman who has 4 children and a husband, and that is a lot. I'm a single mom with 2 kids. And by 8 o'clock at night, I'm like, I cannot wait to be asleep in my bed, So it's like, that doesn't necessarily mean that my mom was depressed. It might have meant she was tired or having a bad day one day. And I chose that to be the story of my life. And that's what we do as humans. We're very, as little people, we decide what our role is, And so, I look at that and I go, yeah, that's why I'm famous.
Yeah.
Because if I could be great, then people would love me, right? So then you realize, wait, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah. So last kind of question about childhood I'm interested in, and I alluded to this a moment ago. So I had this dream last night, and after I dug on it a little bit, I realized, that's about this unresolved childhood, actually more adolescent, early 20s experience. And just because I'm about to ask you to be vulnerable, I'll say what it was for me was that I have carried with me a sense that the church of my childhood that was highly formative and loved me as a child, by the time I started getting theological education, I felt like they rejected me.
Oh, my.
And so I realized in that dream, I'm still processing that. I thought I had processed that, but I'm still processing that. So to whatever degree you would want to share, and you may or may not have anything like that, but do you have any kind of things you feel like still you carry with you that you've not yet sufficiently processed?
Oh, there are always things that I come back to. 2 things, actually. The shame that I felt when I was a young school teacher, and I was part of a ministry at an evangelical church in St. Louis called Grace Christian. And I don't know. I felt like I was really scorned when it was, passed around our prison ministry that we did, that I would drink beer. And I was suddenly not invited to do anything anymore. And that has come up for me. And that was one of my first experiences where I had to make peace with knowing who I am in my faith, not who other people believe me to be in my faith. I think we have those all the way through our lives, but that one always stuck out for me because my relationship to the church mattered to me so much. And I think largely because of ego, of wanting to be seen as somebody who was on fire. And it was such an odd thing to be discarded when really I felt like, but wait a minute, I'm a good person and I'm delivering for the Lord. And I don't think the Lord would probably care if I have a beer or 2 now and again. So, and that was my own thing.
Yeah, it's amazing, I think, the way in which the experience of shame, I think, can be proportionate to or grossly disproportionate to whatever triggers it. But the powerful experience of shame linked up with that fear that you're talking about, it's just like that stuff just sears stuff in us, and it just takes a long time.
There are early woundings that seems so monumental that, like you're talking about, what did it feel like to the other person? I can remember my mom slapping me in a department store once across the face. Now, parenting was different back then, obviously. For me, pointing out somebody who was in a wheelchair. I'd never seen that before. And I'm sure my mom was probably having a bad day, but who knows? I carried that around with me, but my mom didn't carry it around. My mom loved me, and that was done, and that was a moment. And there are those moments in your life that become a part of the fabric of who you deem you are, that you have to unravel the rest of your life. And it can just be a moment, and you interpret that as being whether you're worthy of being seen as good again or being loved. I mean, I tell my kids all the time, living is hard work, but it can be beautiful and joyful, but not without feeling.
Well, Cheryl throwing down the truth there as you're sitting there on your couch in your living room with Cheryl Crow having this very vulnerable conversation. I mean, what stays with you now?
Well, I have recounted several elements of that conversation repeatedly since I had that day to sit down with Cheryl. And I think for me, Cheryl Crow represented, she was one of the great rock and rollers of, my 20s and 30s. She was like the bomb. She's Cheryl Crow, and she's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I was just so fascinated with the way in which she was so vulnerable about the way in which these stories that we tell ourselves have such a profound impact upon us. And one that she said there early in that clip, we can tell ourselves these stories and we still limit ourselves. And it's fascinating to me to hear somebody like Cheryl Crow say, I've limited myself. Because I'm thinking, you've limited yourself? Right. You're kidding, right? Yeah. But again, to be reminded, we tell ourselves these stories and they can have this profound, disproportionately large impact upon us. And then the story that she told about feeling like she was discarded or shamed because she would drink a beer. And, one, I relate to that kind of social, cultural dynamic in a church setting. But again, it was fascinating to me here's a Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, and she's still caring about that memory in a way that she said still comes up for her. Yeah. And it just reminds me, that we are all tender inside. And we all get shaped in these profound ways by these experiences that can be very painful. And again, as we said earlier in this episode, talking about Terrence Lester, they can also be disproportionately for the good, right? And so I think to whatever degree any of us have an impact upon the people around us, which is large, to try to be intentional about sowing seeds of disproportionately good things in people's lives around us and being aware of the way in which our incautiousness or our harshness might have a disproportionately large negative effect upon someone.
Well said. Yeah, I'm just reminded that we have agency in how we respond to everything that happens to us in our lives.
That's a crucial thing to remind us of, right? Because you can take what I just said and receive that in a sort of victimized role, as a victim role, and saying, all this stuff happened to me. But you're reminding us, well, it is true that hard stuff happens to us. But then again, to claim our agency and to say, I don't have to simply lie down in being a victim when these difficult things happen to me.
One big thing that happened this year for the No Small Endeavor family, we started a new show.
We did.
The Subtext, Beneath the Headlines, Beyond the Obvious with Savannah Locke and you, Lee C. Camp. For those who haven't heard it, could you explain the premise of the Subtext?
Yes. People like you and other people on our team tease me often.
Just because, like young, handsome team members?
Yeah. That's you young, handsome team members. You tease me about the fact that I do not use a cell phone, a device, a mobile device, and act as if I know nothing about what's going on in the world because I do not have these things constantly blaring into my life. But anyway, so there was enough teasing about that this notion that I am pop culture illiterate, which in many cases I would say is true.
A proud badge of honor.
A proud badge of honor. But anyway, the question was, what would it be like if we had someone bring pop culture stuff to Lee, some headline, and then you talk about, what's beneath that, but go beyond the obvious beyond culture war kind of observations about things, and instead ask questions about what's the theological or the philosophical or the moral, ethical kind of stuff going on underneath something, and explore it from these different angles and see what might come up in such a conversation. So we've been doing that, and it's been great fun. Savannah is a great host. She's also has training in theology, and she's just very schooled in pop culture too. And so it's really fun, and it's been a great time.
So you guys have talked about Taylor Swift's Life of a Showgirl. You've talked about Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. You've talked about the Liver King and Superman and all sorts of things. But I've chosen a clip that in many ways brings us back to the beginning of this episode with what we heard from Sharon McMahon about her saying no one can do everything, but everyone can do something. So this clip comes from an episode where you and Savannah are talking about the CEO of Spotify investing in an AI weapons company. And that leads to this discussion around the question, like, do any of us have a clean dollar bill in our pocket? Or are we all complicit? And then you quote Dorothy Day, the patron saint of the Catholic worker movement, who said, no, we're all part of the dirty, rotten system. And so that leaves us off, where a lot of people, at least I do, I can stop. Well, then what can I do? And that's where this clip starts.
What can you do with your life? A whole bunch of stuff. You can do a whole bunch of stuff with your life to bear witness to something beautiful, true, and good, something redemptive, something opposed to the powers and the principalities and all that kind of stuff. There's lots that can be done. So just work at it.
Yeah.
Peter Marr, the guy I was trying to think of, I was talking about a minute ago, that came to Dorothy Day to help her start the Catholic Worker House, used to say something like, decide the work you're going to do, prepare yourself to do it, and then go do it.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful sort of invitation of there's all sorts of stuff to do. Decide what you want to do. Prepare yourself to do it, and then go do it.
I think that there, now that you're speaking, it makes me realize that we romanticize an activist life.
Yeah.
In the way that we think like it's for a certain few, and that it was so clear to them, like that this is what they were meant to do or whatever, instead of recognizing that there's just dirt in their fingernails because they're doing something.
Yeah.
And I think that the reality is that everyone has a role to play. This reminds me, yesterday I was in a co-write or 2 days ago with a gal, and she said, I asked her, like, what's kind of bringing you peace? What's your vision in this next part of life? Whatever. And she said, for me, it's this picture that she got in her head of God giving her a little corner of a garden to tend to. And she said, so I am going to spend my life tending to this part of the garden.
Yeah.
And she was like, I'm not going to worry about other people having bigger pieces of land. I'm not going to worry about this or that. I'm going to stay focused on what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something so pure about that, of just saying, like, what is in front of me to do? And what am I, like, even just onto a skill set, like, what am I good at?
Yeah.
I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's lovely. That reminds me, going back to Wendell Berry, I think one of the challenge, I've read a lot of Wendell Berry through the years, and I think one of the challenges with Wendell is that, again, he draws such this, what some would see as an ideal sort of vision of community, that you can kind of come away from that saying, well, what do you want me to do? Right? And I was reading some interview or something one time where somebody said, I don't know what to do with all this, Wendell Berry. You've given this sort of vision and I feel overwhelmed. Like, what do you want me to do? Mm-hmm. And he said, start with planting a tree and taking care of the tree.
Wow.
And so I think that, again, what can you do? Well, there's a lot you can do.
Yeah.
So do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's so good.
Well, Lee, that is a wrap on our No Small Endeavor Best of 2025 episode. It is a shame, I'll say, that we left so many amazing episodes out, but all abridged episodes and their corresponding unabridged episodes can be found on our podcast wherever you listen.
Thank you, Jacob.
My pleasure.
You've been listening to our episode on some of our favorite interviews from 2025. We are profoundly grateful to have you as a listener, and we look forward to lots of new opportunities for great conversations in 2026. Happy New Year, and much joy to you and all of yours. We gratefully acknowledge the support of Lilly Endowment Incorporated, a private philanthropic foundation supporting the causes of community development, education, and religion. Our thanks to all the stellar team that makes this show possible: Christy Bragg, Jakob Lewis, Carrie Harmon, Jason Cheesley, Sophie Byard, Kate Hayes, Mary Evelyn Brown, and Audrey Griffith. Our theme song was composed by Tim Lauer. Thanks for listening, and let's keep exploring what it means to live a good life together. No Small Endeavor is a production of Tokens Media, LLC, and
Great Feeling Studios.